monks, but they're very few actually. They're not nearly enough. So there, and then some of the Burmese and Thai people, you know, like Ajahn Sumedho and those guys, you know, Ajahn Amaro or whatever. I consider those really important for American Buddhism. You have loud people saying who themselves are ex-monks, oh no, we don't need that in America. But we shouldn't listen to them. They can have lay communities, that's fine too. But I think it would be very important, you know, if you have support from Korea to come here and make a real authentic Korean monastery. And then hopefully then as well, perhaps an urban city center where it's more educational and has like evening courses and, you know, this kind of thing, you know, more like that for the lay people. As your community expands, you know.
Yeah.
But that's what I do. I was just reading the biography of a very wonderful person whom I never met, and he may have passed away now. Acharya Thupten Loden is his name, and he lived in Melbourne, and he went down there in the 80s, I think. And before that, he was really doing really rigorous Tibetan training from Tibet itself, and then within India. And he was kind of reluctant to go, but Dalai Lama asked him to go finally. And he created a beautiful place in Melbourne, finally, on 20 acres, where it has a fantastic 15-acre garden, and they live in a certain way, and he like washes dishes with people, and he, you know, which he wouldn't have done in a Tibetan monastery, but his very rigorous study they have, and rigorous meditation. And so he came out of a completely traditional Tibetan thing and preserved as much of that as he could, and then he adapted that in a living situation. And it's been very successful. He has they call Tibetan Buddhist societies in 4 or 5 cities in Australia, and he was just a model person, you know, no hanky-panky, no nonsense, you know. So that's what needs to be done, I think. And those will become the seeds of it. And the other thing that we need is we need some of these wealthy Buddhists from Asia to fund a lot of chairs in universities that will, you know, that they have to realize they can't control the appointments in those chairs. And some of the occupants maybe won't even be Buddhist, because you can't stipulate that they will. But they should be created, you know, and then they will teach courses that the young people will study. And in those courses, they won't be taught to meditate, and they won't be taught to sign up as Buddhists, but they will learn the history and the thought and the literature of Buddhism, and then many will gravitate in that direction later.
I find I'm in Europe a lot more. I'm actually trying to start a center in Europe.
Good.
And I find there's much more receptivity for a celibate monastic practitioner in Europe.
Great.
People's
Which
attitude
countries?
With Germany.
Oh, good, yes.
France, of course, the Catholic countries,
yes.
Poland, Czech Republic. Even in the northern countries, which went a little bit more Lutheran and let go of Catholic monasticism very early. But there is this idea. In America, it's different.
I know, but
in America, it's a sickness if you want to practice as a monk. You are a deviant.
I know.
And you're always up against that, and it's, I mean, it's
But,
it's
you know,
shocking.
but Thomas Merton was very respected, and Brother David Seindelrast and Father Thomas Keating. There is a beginning, there are exceptional individuals, and then there's a beginning admiration of this. And I think, you know, as, well, you know, we're lucky enough now to be going bankrupt as a country.
Yeah.
So we cannot really afford this level of militarism very soon.
Yeah.
And our creditors are not going to lend us the money to make more weapons to threaten them with.
Yeah.
And so I think that there will then be need for this sort of thing. You know, like the monastic community is a very powerful social transformative institution and very necessary. And I don't think we should be deterred because there's some resistance to the idea.
But your whole notion of the permanent free lunch, which I think is amazing. I read it in an interview, in a talk you gave at a Theravada temple out in California somewhere about 10, 12, 13 years ago. I actually excerpted it and put it into our Quantum School of Zen newsletter, which was considered very shocking at the time because it was a teaching from quote-unquote outside the tradition. But I was really blown away by what you had to say about that. A permanent free lunch. We will not have an authentic Buddhism until we were able to sponsor these people, a permanent free lunch, people who do nothing.
That's right.
And we support them for it.
That's right.
But,
exactly.
But in this culture, in this Protestant work ethic culture, it swims not just against the stream. It is so...
But we have to change that culture. I mean, it is changing anyway. And remember when Kennedy was president, well, you don't remember, but when Kennedy became president, it was a big freak out because he was a Catholic. That was so unheard of. You know?
Right.
And now, like, whatever, you know, go whatever it is. And there's still a resistance to it, your Palins and your people, you know. But It's changing, and it's really critical, I think. It's really critical. So, I mean, don't let go of the cultural tradition and don't do that. And yet, there will be some adaptation, but not too much of an adaptation. You know?
Yeah.
Too much of an adaptation, it just gets to be like shopping center. Like
exactly, exactly.
I think that on the level of pluralism and the level of influence of America, when you come back from very authentic Korean Son tradition yourself, and you create a core where you want to promote that, and there's some few who will be able to do that and want to do that, and it will be very good for them to do so. On the other hand, I think all of us have the responsibility to learn a lot more about the other Buddhisms of the other parts of Asia. You know, like if someone comes to America, even within, say, Tibetan Buddhism, they come as a Nyingma, and then in America, they refuse to learn anything about Gelugpa, or vice versa. That's really not good. Because the point is that some of the differences that developed in Asia are very cultural related. And for example, anybody in Korea who went into Son already knew about the Avatamsaka Sutra. They grew up seeing images of Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, and Maitreya, and whatever it is. And they had basic view of karma and former and future life. So they had a whole acculturation that all contributed to them having a bodhisattva motivation in the Zen context. So then if they come here and you just do Zen and you don't try to reproduce at all that matrix that the Zen flourished in either Japan or Korea or Vietnam or wherever it is, then you're creating an artificial thing liable to misappropriation, which I think has happened a lot here. And partly when people also are insecure and they're competing with other groups and they want to just do their own thing, and you have all kind of weird behaviors, even amongst different Tibetan groups, believe me. So I think there's a job that American Buddhism can do by being in a position to sort of inventory and also going to original Indian Buddhism and then looking at Mahayana and looking at Tantra, and it can broaden horizons that are just the rigid stuff from Burma or the rigid stuff from Sri Lanka or the rigid stuff from Eastern Tibet or something, and can look like, I think a lot of the Tibetan people could do more Zen, for example, and long retreats at an earlier stage in their study. And the Zen people could do more Tibetan type study and logic and debate and learning, you know, the creating the great doubt in some varieties of Zen, you know, comes from critical thinking banging against itself. But if you don't have sharp critical thinking, then you're just going to have a great mush instead of a great doubt. So and Americans are not, Western people are not necessarily trained to think or argue rigorously. We don't have a good tradition of debate in this country. So, I mean, we should use things from all of the whole pharmacopoeia of Tibetan educational, not Tibetan, of Buddhist educational strategies that have been developed in many different cultures over many different centuries, you know, for many different types of people. And we can really collect all of that in an amazing way, do you know what I mean? And then people in Asia can Google it. You know, when students ask me, as it's seeing me as a professor, right? And I offer a course in Buddhism. Often, a lot of students come to me and they say, "Well, we need a guru. Where can we go? We want to do some advanced something." And I always tell them, I say, "Look, I don't recommend this person or that person. They're the good people. You have to investigate yourself." I said, but the key is, don't, you know, you can be more trusting and more reliant, and you can take more seriously any teacher who is quite willing for you to go to other teachers. Who's not really advancing themselves, as they can really, you know, the person who says, "Now you're at one-stop shopping here, and also don't go anywhere else, you get confused." Then they thank you so much and go elsewhere. Because the really good teacher is, you know, they are ready to teach someone who really wants them to teach them. But they're not really wanting to take on the burden of people.
And hold on to them.
If they're not that serious, so they're going to even discourage you. So if someone's discouraging, you should see that as a good sign. I said, or just relaxed and open about it, and otherwise the people who want you to stay with them only are developing a cult and forget about it.
My teacher sent me and some of the other students of my generation to Japan. He kicked us out after 10 years of practice or 15 years of practice. Said, "Now go." And this is remarkable because of the Koreans' very difficult, bitter history with the Japanese, and the sense that we transmitted the Buddha Dharma to Japan, but don't get any credit for it in any book. But he sent us to Japan and said, go do a sesshin there.